Welcome, everyone, to the C-Suite Sales and Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a very interesting guest with Ryan Nelsen. Now, Ryan, you are currently the CMO at StackAdapt. I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about your professional background before we get started here, because we're going to be talking today about how do we redefine value in the buyer's journey. And I think that starts with really defining what is the buyer's journey and what are the challenges in today's buyer journey. So we're going to jump into all of that. But I thought it was fascinating, some things that I'd love to have some people know about you. Personally, you are a father of 4 daughters, which means you are highly resilient. Whether that was 4 daughters or 4 sons, that's a lot. I give that to you. You're actually a descendant of Butch Cassidy, as in Butch Cassidy, the Sundance Kid, avid outdoorsman. You live in Utah, so I think that you're right up against the mountains there. I'd love to have you, just before we dig deep into all of this, maybe explain a little bit more about your professional background, and we'll get started.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. So I'm a B2B marketer. I've been fortunate to be at several different tech companies in the B2B space. Started at a couple small tech companies and then joined Qualtrics in 2013, around 40 million in ARR, and left there about 6 years later at 800 million. It was a great journey of hiring, a lot of growth. I learned a lot. I was very fortunate to be there at that time. And then I joined a company, kind of a fast-growing company in Utah called MX, and I helped grow and scale that company. And then about a year ago, was recruited to StackAdapt, where I'm just incredibly fortunate to be here. We're growing super fast and adding a lot of value in the advertising and marketing space. So it's fun to be able to speak and work with marketers every day, because that's what I do. And that's what our software serves. So it's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, thank you. Managing all of that growth gives a real interesting perspective, because I've talked to a lot of C-suite executives, and through that growth, one of the things that almost always happens is fundamentally almost who we are as a company and our ICP and how we go to market. You reinvent and you reinvent. So you're never standing back on your laurels, right? I would like to start out, if we're talking about how to redefine value in the buyer's journey, just get your perspective on what is the buyer's journey, how has it changed recently, and what then are the major challenges to us as CMOs?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think I'd start with saying that the buyer's journey, buyers buy on trust. And I think businesses are really about building trust. And it comes down to that. And how do you do that in creative ways, in genuine ways? And if you think about it, the buyer's journey is not always linear. Now there's going to be different inputs into that journey. There's different touch points and inflections in that journey. And so how do you use technology, people, and the resources available to us now through AI and everything else to start stitching that journey together in a more seamless, connected way. And so whether you're a B2B or a B2C company, I think it's business to human. And there's a common thread there that we're marketing to humans, and humans care about different things. And so it's understanding, what do they care about? What's your value? And how do you connect the dots between those two?
I love how you very quickly brought it back to it's all about humans for me. And then what that means, it's about the relationship. And you started this off by talking about it's all about trust, right? Those are all woven together. And I want to ask you something, because you brought this up. There was a study that came out about a year ago, and it was called the Trust Gap. And it was for B2B buyers. And it said that 74% of B2B buyers do not trust the customer evidence that we present to them. So building this trust of what we do for our clients, right? And we package it in all kinds of ways. We spend a lot of time communicating our value. And to learn that 3/4 of them don't believe it, right? Like, there is a trust gap. There is, back to taking marketing 101 in schools, our brands are trust marks, right? What does that mean for us? Like, operating as a CMO in that kind of an environment?
Yeah, there's a lot of noise. So obviously everybody listening to this as well, like there's a lot coming at you. You never know what to trust in terms of, is someone being genuine? Are they trying to sell you something? Are they trying to add value? Most of the time in business, we're trying to add value and sell something to somebody, but how do you do that in a connected way that actually is genuine and meaningful? And so it's constantly deciphering kind of signal from the noise of what is going to add value to our business versus what is maybe doing a favor for somebody because it's really not something I have a priority to do right now. And so I much rather get a text message or a note from somebody that I trust to say, hey, have you checked out this technology yet? Or, hey, are you going to this event? It's going to be some of the best people there. That's much more than getting an invitation from the company directly and saying, this is taking their word for it. And so you got to build that trust for sure. And sometimes using the ecosystem around them is a really great way to do that.
So I want to throw you a curveball almost right away here in the podcast. And there was a woman that was on about a year ago. She's a three-time B2B CMO. And she said, Steve, almost exclusively our campaigns, marketing campaigns, sales campaigns, product development, everything. She said, everything we do is more effective if the voice of the customer leads ours. And it makes good sense, right? Because no matter who we are within the organization, we are a seller on behalf of the organization, right? We have our agenda in mind. But if the voice of the customer can lead ours, can actually help validate our go-to-market story. What we say goes from here to here. So what has your experience been, or just your point of view on having that voice of the customer lead ours?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we're a very, very customer driven company, and I try to be a leader that listens to our customers in both the way we position our company, both our roadmap. We just had a customer advisory board last week, and we hosted 20 of our top clients and going through feedback on our roadmap, feedback on how we position and message the company, what value. Even I went through sort of pain points and differentiators of what differentiates us against our competitors and what truly do they value versus what do they not really value. And getting that voice to the customer. I'm coming from a CX background or at Qualtrics, where there's very much, we did a survey for everything. We engaged our customers in all of that. We tended to lean really heavy into in-person experiences and even virtual experiences to get in front of the customer as much as possible. As a marketing leader, I love having our product marketing team and others just having regular syncs with our customer, listening to calls and voice calls as well to be able to understand pain points. So all of that infuses into the overall kind of puzzle pieces and putting a picture together of how is it that we're adding value, how is it that they're actually buying, and how can we connect those two.
So you just went over a lot in terms of touch points with the customer, right? Down to face-to-face meetings with customers, right? And I want to ask you this question in terms of that's a lot of work. That takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, a lot of focus. There's not a company out there that doesn't say, no, we don't want to be customer focused. We don't want to be customer obsessed. We all do. The difference is kind of where you put the money where your mouth is, right? Are you actually doing something about that? And I talk to lots of CMOs that are just, they got 150, 180% of what they can get done in a day. They're taking it from all sides. The list of requests that are coming to the marketing department never ends. It's growing, it's growing, it's growing. It's very easy to not do some of the things that are the harder things, but the right things to do. What you just talked about is not easy to do. That takes a lot of time and a lot of dedication, right? And a lot of resources. What is your advice to other CMOs or CEOs or CROs, C-suite executives that are listening to this on why that amount of time, that amount of dedication is worth it?
Yeah. Comes down to focus and priority. I think a good question to ask yourself is, are you a customer driven company or are you a product driven company? And I think there's actually good benefits of being both in that. You can think of maybe iconic brands and companies of maybe they'll build what they know to be true, regardless of what customer feedback says, because the customer maybe doesn't know yet what the next phase of AI is going to be, for example. And back to Henry Ford, they're building the car instead of faster horses. And so there's a combination of that as we think about building a roadmap. But I do want to make sure there is always a good lens of the customer and making sure that we're close to what is truly going to resonate, what's going to pack the biggest punch. So I think a question that every tech leader needs to ask themselves, and how much does the customer infuse into the roadmap, into the messaging, into the journey? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do, is to serve them as a customer.
So how does that fit into the topic of our conversation here today? How to redefine value in the buyer's journey?
Yeah, I think as marketers, I think there's a lot of things we can be doing. I always like, as marketers, going deeper into the funnel and owning the entire journey end to end. A lot of times marketing leaders will rely on a CRO and a chief revenue officer to kind of like, we passed the lead off and we did our job. I always like having our teams being measured one or two steps deeper in the funnel, even into the opportunity creation phase, and then all the way through the journey of having them client sign a contract, their renewal, what's their onboarding renewal process look like as well. So it's end to end. And I think a lot of that leads into two parts of marketing that maybe I think would be helpful to talk about in terms of brand marketing and performance marketing. And I think those two areas, if you think about those two as the two-headed monster, or the heart and the mind, or the art and the science of marketing, both are critical and I think help cover the entire top of funnel, mid funnel, bottom of funnel of a journey. So I think it'd be good to maybe dive into.
So that's an interesting topic, right? Because I know you're involved in a lot of executive meetings, board meetings, where some of the first questions are, hey, where are we on this month or this quarter's quota? How are we looking for next? And then you come in and you start talking about, I'm not saying you, but just in general, the brand, and everybody's eyes glaze over. Right? Because you got a CRO that's like, hey, I've got a quota over my head. I got a team that has to deliver against this. How do you reconcile or balance those? Because we all know that today's brand is tomorrow's demand, right? We can't do that. But in your mind, how do you think about that two-headed monster, as you put it, right? How do we accomplish both sides of that equation and still keep our jobs, keep alignment with our CEOs, our CROs, and such?
Well, first off, I think I envision a world where everything is measurable. And oftentimes, brand marketing is a lot more difficult to measure. You can do brand lift studies and other things, but it's not as crisp often as a performance marketing channel where you're understanding leads and pipeline SQLs and you're actually driving the funnel. What's interesting about brand marketing is it's so critical, but if you only focus on brand marketing, you're probably going to get fired because you're not proving ROI to the board and to the CEO. But if you only focus on performance marketing, you're probably going to have a top of funnel that drives up pretty quickly and there's no actually association with your brand. So from a B2C standpoint, you're sitting in a grocery aisle and you're deciding which product to choose. And oftentimes they're just choosing the best price or whatever maybe a coupon is on the aisle. But if somebody is an advocate or an ambassador of that brand, they'd pay double, triple, quadruple the price for that. And because of the emotional connection with the brand. And I think about that. I mentioned the art and science of the heart and mind. But as I zoom out to the entire kind of proving value as a marketing leader, what if you could, back to the question, what if you could make everything performance driven, but you're actually doing brand marketing activities? So there's some things that StackAdapt we're working on, exciting around that, but also just connecting that journey of brand lift and the emotional connection to actually the campaign and the touch points and the ROI there. Because at the end of the day, most B2B companies, they focus very heavily on performance marketing. It's just given. I've said this before. My mom probably doesn't even know who Salesforce is. And so I don't know if I'll be leading marketing for a company that the whole world will know about, but it's really, as a B2B marketer, is really, really critical that the right buyer knows who we are. And that's what matters most.
So you gave a good example in the B2C world, right? And that knowledge of that brand and trust with that brand, you'll pay significantly more. Like there's real value to it. I think it was like 8 or 10 CEOs ago at Coca-Cola. He said that Coca-Cola could be obliterated off the face of the earth. And I could walk into a bank and get a loan for $100 billion just on the value of the Coca-Cola brand itself. How does that thinking translate into the B2B world? Because more and more is translating over. Like customer experience expectations from the B2C world are almost exactly on par with what we're expecting now in the B2B world. Like this idea of a strong brand for a B2B brand, it's very easy for us to understand how it's important for a B2C brand. In your mind, why is it that important for a B2B brand?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to the word momentum. You can feel in B2B which companies are the horse to bet on because of the momentum they have. You'll start to see that in conversations on LinkedIn. And I don't tend to post a lot on LinkedIn or be very vocal or amplified on LinkedIn, but I think a lot of people do that really well. And it's hard to know what's real and what's not. But if you start to have an ecosystem of, hey, we're choosing this technology. Hey, have you used this technology? Hey, have you looked at this? This is actually a different way of doing things. You start to get influenced in some of the decision making you have because you have this groundswell movement of you got to pick the winner. And so that's, I think, an interesting take on the influence of social media and overall influence in terms of influencers. Even if they're not an influencer, is it a marketer you trust that's talking about something? So back to the point we talked about at the beginning.
So you also brought up something, and I don't want you to reveal anything that you're doing at StackAdapt that's still in the roadmap or hasn't been launched yet. But you said something, at the beginning it was like this two-headed monster and the brand and performance. And a lot of people have a very, very defined point of view that those are two separate activities. And you very clearly said they don't always have to be, right? Is there any example beyond what's proprietary and what you're going to roll out, but any examples you can share with us where that's a good idea. Here's a story. Here's an example of where you can actually accomplish both of those at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think traditionally, let's talk about advertising maybe for a moment, since we're in this space and a lot of people are very engaged in advertising on this podcast. Traditional channels of programmatic have been display native, some of these channels that you traditionally advertise on, Increasingly, though, as we move into connected TV and digital out of home, the digital out of home billboards, a lot of those are brand marketing plays where you're maybe not having a direct response. What's interesting is a couple of years ago, Coinbase had a Super Bowl ad and they had a QR code. If you remember the QR code bouncing on the screen, and it kind of, everybody's waiting for it to hit the corner of the screen. From what I saw, they had 20 million downloads. It was like a trending in the top app on the App Store. And it was incredibly, like, they used a Super Bowl ad to drive performance. And it was basically using a medium that's traditionally used by brand. And they drove a ton of revenue from it just immediately from it. So it was cool, maybe one example, but increasingly as StackAdapt, the way I think about it, you can run all your different programmatic channels on StackAdapt, but we're also launched recently over the last couple of years, connected TV and digital out of home and some of these areas. And so we're measuring that as well. So all the different TV and the ability to measure that, reach the right audience in the right location at the right time with the right message is getting more and more available to the world. And what's awesome about it is with AI, you can now start to create these ads in seconds and minutes that normally took maybe a month or two or three and $100,000 to go build a commercial. You can do that now pretty quickly. And so it's opening up the world to a lot more brands and a lot more agencies to be able to play in that ecosystem.
It's a good idea. And in fact, that's out of the box thinking. And in our previous conversation, like that Super Bowl ad, what you're talking about there, you talked about we need to be thinking outside of the box in B2B marketing. Can you expand on that and what you're talking about there?
Yeah, we try so hard as marketers to reach our audiences and we try to cut through the noise. And I've had experiences in my career that kind of just had light bulb moments where I thought, we've been doing everything perfectly to the playbook and it's just not resonating. It's just not working. We're running a multi-touch campaign and there's a white paper and there's a webinar following it and there may be a landing a direct mail at the perfect time and letting them know that something arrived. But a lot of that times, the perfect business message is not what the audience wants to hear. They want to hear maybe something personal to what they actually care about as one of their passion projects. So give you maybe one example. We're trying to get in touch with a very, very large Fortune 20 company, CMO, trying to engage with them. And they very, very large budget, obviously, very, very busy. Everything we were doing, pretty solid one-to-one ABM campaign. We were running basically all the different things that I think we could pull. And nothing was really resonating, getting through. And so I basically just paused the team and said, hey, what does this person really care about? Like, let's go find out what they really, really care about. And I just went on Twitter at the time, X, and basically found that they loved BMW. And they just huge BMW fan. And it was fortunate that we had BMW just become a client of ours. And I was texting with the president of BMW North America at the time, who was running a lot of like sales for North America and a lot of the production of things. And I said, there's probably a win-win scenario here where I could maybe run an idea. So I basically just asked him, I said, hey, what do you think about hosting maybe 15 or 20 CMOs down at your racetrack in South Carolina? Maybe a backstage tour, factory tour, maybe see the robots, and then we'll maybe go across the street, race some cars in the afternoon. What do you think about it? And he's like, well, done, sold, let's do it. I was like, awesome. So same day, just a few minutes later, I sent a quick 2-line email to the CMO of this company I mentioned. And they responded in 8 minutes and said, yeah, I said, I'll be there. Who can I bring? And that was just a light bulb moment for me where it just changed the way I think about things. And if someone's passionate about something and something's very targeted, very personalized, very relevant, it will cut through the noise. And that cascaded to a new way of how I thought about things. That brought together 15 or 20 of the very best brands. We then created an experience around that. And then that rippled, and the validation of BMW being a client of ours validated while they were there. So there was just so many winning scenarios in that just kind of made a beautiful picture. It was great.
That is a phenomenal story because when we go back to creating real value in the buyer's journey, we all have, whether it's in Salesforce, HubSpot, or whatever, we all have our CRMs. We all have those high priority targets we're going after, and we just can't get through. I mean, no matter what we try, we just can't get through. And so redefining value, the value didn't have to be about our product. It doesn't have to be about our tech. It doesn't have to be about our service, right? There was nothing in that message that got that meeting together. The goal was, going back to what you said earlier, it's about people. It's about relationships, right? You tied into what you knew could create a relationship with that person that then would connect on into a business relationship. Am I tying that back together correctly?
Yeah, it's about how do you go create win-win value moments. And I think there's businesses about relationships, businesses about humans and people. And everybody says, why do we do the things we do? And it's for the people around us. It's to make an impact, to make a difference, to give back. And it all comes down to people and how ultimately they want to connect with each other in ways that add value to their business and add value to the world. So I think it's well put how you said it.
You mentioned earlier AI. AI has the ability to redefine how we provide value in so many ways. What is the future in your mind of AI in B2B marketing and redefining value in the buyer's journey?
So I think most marketers are doing predictive AI in good ways. I think most of us are not fully taking advantage of generative AI in the most impactful and meaningful ways. I was going to go out and hire an AI coach and say, how do I get somebody that can just feed me just every single update that's happening on a weekly, daily basis so I can just stay on the cutting edge, because there's just so much to keep up on. There's a lot of businesses that are going to be created through AI coaching, AI technology. That's just some of the best advice I could give to anybody right now is just get really, really sharp on this, and especially people coming out of college, become an expert in all the tools, play around with everything, because there's companies all the time hiring somebody that's going to help educate and do that. So what I'm doing is on Fridays is I'm setting up a kind of a regular cadence with our team, just called an AI coach. And we're going to coach each other, and we're going to bring in external speakers. We're going to bring in our internal experts as well, building on all of our AI technology. And we're going to do a quick presentation, brown bag, on what you learned in AI this week or what made you better in your job this week with the use of AI. But I'd love to hear from those listening as well. Reach out if you'd like, but what you're doing to get better here, because I don't think CMOs broadly are spending enough time on it. I think a lot of content creators are using it, the basic tools, and speeding up process. But there's so much we can do with data and connecting systems and connecting process and getting more creative that we just are scratching the surface. So it's going to be a fun couple of years up ahead.
How long have you been doing this weekly brown bag lunch AI?
We're just kicking it off, actually, this last little bit. It's TBD on the nuances of what works the best, but I want it to be a combination of our team. Sometimes when you teach something, you learn a lot better and a lot easier. And so a combination of like our team volunteering and coming with what did they learn, what made them better, but also as well around what our internal experts can do as well.
That is a phenomenal idea. And here's what I'm taking away from that is that in redefining value, what you just said there is, I have a lot of faith and hope in AI that it's going to redefine value. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but let's create something very creative and dynamic and collaborative. And let's start exploring it internally, externally, because I need to understand, I need to find the solutions that are going to add more and more value what we're doing. I have to do that in order to stay competitive, to stay ahead, right? So my big takeaway is you don't have to have the idea right now necessarily, but if you have the desire that I'm going to focus and I'm going to be creative and I'm going to find new ways to create value. And I'm going to make sure I have the time to do that. Like, I love how you run into a wall, a problem, or you see an opportunity. And you're like, I'm going to think about it differently. Right. So on another podcast we talk a lot about company culture, and we talk a lot about collaboration. We talk a lot about psychological safety. We talk a lot about having everybody have a role in contributing and feeling comfortable doing that. I hadn't planned to ask this, but it feels like that's a lot of what you're doing with your team.
Definitely lots of collaboration. I think I love brainstorm, just riffing on new ideas. I certainly don't have all the ideas and certainly not all the ways to execute. And so looping in the team, making sure there's a good cross-functional dynamic between our marketing team, and then just cross-functionally, like getting ideas across the organization, ideas from customers, ideas from colleagues and former friends and colleagues is always a great way to tap into that.
Ryan, we've covered a lot of territory here, right? And our poor human brains, we can only remember about 2 or 3 things at a time. If you were going to say to the audience that's tuning into this, what's the single most important takeaway that you want them to have from consuming this podcast? What would that be?
It's a great question. I'd say know your audience and know your value, and then connect those two. And then just be sure to be bold about it and have a lot of fun along the way. We're all here in business, get really serious, but I think life's about having fun, doing big things, dreaming big, and it's about the journey. So yeah, it goes back to the audience. Know your audience and know the pain points that they really, really need you to solve. Know the value and how you solve those pain points. And it comes down to that. And that's where the magic happens.
I love it. So here's what I know is going to happen. People are going to have questions. Is it okay if we provide a link to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out and ask you questions?
Absolutely. Yeah, please do. That'd be great.
All right. Well, Ryan, thank you so much. Such incredible thinking and stories and elaboration in ways that we just need to be thinking differently and creating and adding value in different ways. It's a real kind of shot in the arm today. I really appreciate your help here today.
It's a pleasure being here, Steve. Thank you so much for having me.